All right, thank you for attending. This is the investigation of the nature of time, and mixed in with that is actually a little bit of analysis of Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. The interesting thing about that is if we were going to go on and on for 2 days, I still wouldn't be able to get in everything about Einstein's theory of relativity, but the good news is I'm going to just focus on the parts of relativity that only pertain to our investigation of time. Why are we doing this? Well, anybody who likes science really likes to see how things tick, what makes things work. And ironically, I don't think people spend enough time on trying to figure out what makes time tick. And since relativity is something that can give us some insight into time, I think that's really a good place to start. So, how do we begin? Well, we could look at investigating time much like we would investigate the nature of something like temperature or the nature of color. And what I mean by that is, starting with temperature. We perceive temperature. We feel temperatures as being hot or cold. So we say this is hot, this is hotter, this is cold, this is colder. But is there an actual mechanism behind what produces that effect that we feel as that property? And the answer is yes. Most of the material universe is made of atoms and molecules, and it turns out that the increased velocity of those atoms and molecules increase what we consider to be temperature. For the atoms and molecules on their level, it increases their kinetic energy, but we actually perceive it as a temperature going up or going down. So there's an actual mechanism behind what we perceive as temperature. Same thing with color. We look at all different colors, blue, red, yellow, green, orange, and we're able to distinguish the different colors, and we can perceive all these different colors. But is there something behind it on a universal scale? And it is. There's different electromagnetic waves that are produced at different frequencies, and we have receptors that will actually convert those to various colors. So out there in the universe, there really is no color. There's just a bunch of different waves and particles moving at different frequencies, but we can break them down and produce them into different colors. So that's really the whole purpose of today, is to see if what we perceive as time, there's some sort of fundamental mechanism behind it. Okay? So why relativity? Well, Albert Einstein's relativity introduces us to the concept that the rate at which time elapses is not absolute. And that's really an interesting thing, because most of us probably think that the entire universe ticks in unison with some master clock. And Einstein showed that that's actually not the case. Under certain circumstances, velocity, gravity, and accelerating frames, those would be the three circumstances we're going to be talking about today, time can actually elapse faster for one person and slower for another. So, and that can be kind of a mind-blowing concept if it's something that you're not used to dealing with. We just think that clocks everywhere tick at the same rate in unison. And Einstein showed that under these extreme conditions, some clocks can actually run faster, some can run slower, and it's not because there's anything wrong with the clock, or it's not because there's any property that changed within the clock itself. Einstein said that clock is just a measure of time, and time itself has actually sped up or slowed down based on inducing these conditions here. So the study of time dilation during constant velocity is in the realm of what Einstein called special theory of relativity. And the study of time dilation due to gravity and acceleration is in the realm of what's called general relativity, and we'll get into a little bit more of each of those things. But with regard to special relativity, that is going to be something where we're going to talk about time slowing down, and with the general relativity, we're going to talk about two relative objects at different places in a gravitational field where time will actually slow down for one and speed up for the other. Gravitational field in particular, whether you like it or not, the facts show that if you have a clock on the surface of the Earth, it will run at a certain rate. If you bring that clock to a higher altitude, the clock will actually run faster and faster the farther you get away from the surface of the Earth. So what that means kind of in reverse is we could say the closer you get to a gravitational field, whether it's the Earth, the planet Jupiter, the Sun, or whatever, the more pronounced effect it's going to have on slowing down your clock. So if you've got a clock way out in the outer reaches of outer space, not near any significant gravitational field, it's going to be running at a pretty fast rate. And then if you bring it closer to any gravitational field, like I said, whether the Earth or the Sun or whatever, that clock, as a fact, will actually slow down as a consequence of it being exposed to that gravitational field. Einstein got into that. And so the reason why we're getting into all of this today is because relativity is kind of the master clue, in my opinion, to unlocking the secrets of time, or at least potentially unlocking the secrets of time, because relativity is something where only through the proper understanding of what makes clocks run faster or slower will we be able to understand what makes them run at all. Makes sense, right? So if we're trying to figure out what the actual mechanism is behind time, to me, the ultimate clue is looking at something where time is actually being altered. It's being sped up or slowed down. If we can figure out what's causing it to speed up and slow down, then we might be able to figure out what makes it run to begin with. So, as you might have guessed, we're going to have to learn a little bit about relativity. So just exactly what is relativity anyway? Relativity can be a lot of different things to a lot of people. The interesting thing is if you take a poll and ask people who they think the most famous scientist of all time is, most of them will say Einstein. Albert Einstein is synonymous with genius and scientists. But interestingly, those very same people, not a majority of them will actually know about relativity, which is the thing that he's famous for. So there's a lot of aspects to relativity, but like I said, we're only going to focus on, in very simplified fashion, the things that pertain to study of time. Take note of that equation. I'll refer to it later, but we won't use it. We won't use something that complicated. I'm going to use something that's going to be a little bit more simplified for our purposes. So in order to fully understand what Einstein's relativity is, we actually have to go back to the 1630s, because relativity actually, as a concept, began back with the astronomer slash physicist Galileo. And Galileo was kind of obsessed with the study of motion and the study of objects. And Galileo's relativity, long before Einstein, actually helped answer the age-old question, what happens when I throw a tennis ball straight up while riding in a moving car? And that's a question people will get from time to time, and they stop and think, and they say, well, geez, if I'm barreling down the thruway at 65 miles an hour, and I've got a tennis ball on my lap and I throw it up, while the car is still in motion, will the ball come straight down in the car for me, or will it go forward, or will the car keep moving and the ball collide with my face as it's on its way down? We're going to answer that question. Of course, back in the 1630s, Galileo didn't have thruways or speeding cars. He had boats. So Galileo observed the difference between accelerating motion and uniform, or what we will call inertial motion. This is a really important first step in understanding the principle of relativity, because first we have to distinguish what the difference is between acceleration and uniform inertial motion. Another phrase for that would be, you'll hear me refer to that as constant velocity at times. So accelerating, that's easy. If I'm at a stoplight and the light turns green and I put my foot on the gas, I'm going from 0 to 30. During that time period, I can feel the car accelerating. I can feel the back of the seat pressing up against my back. I feel the motion. I feel being transported from one place to another. That feeling is because I'm accelerating. Same thing when I slow down, by the way. If we're going from 30 and I slow from 30 down to 0 as we're approaching a red light, then I can kind of feel the car slow down. That's all acceleration or non-inertial motion. Constant velocity, or this uniform inertial motion, is a little different. That would be once you've achieved your speed, whatever it is that you're going to be going. If you're driving in the city and you're going 30, or better yet, if you're on the thruway and your ultimate velocity is 65 miles an hour, once you get up to that 65 miles an hour and you're cruising, maybe you've even set the cruise control, now you're actually going at constant velocity, okay? Things are a little different when you're going at constant velocity than they are when you're accelerating, and Galileo studied that. He also understood that it took energy to speed things up and it took energy to slow things down. That makes sense. If I've got an object and it's perfectly still, it's not moving, and I want to impart a velocity on it, I know it's not going to start moving by itself. I need to put some force behind it. I need to put some energy into it. So I could pick up a baseball or a tennis ball off the ground, and it has zero velocity, and I could roll it, I could throw it, and then suddenly it goes from zero velocity to having a velocity. It might be 5 meters per second, 20 meters per second, whatever. The other interesting thing about that, which Galileo picked up on, was it not only takes energy to speed things up, it actually takes energy to slow things down. An example I can give is a hockey puck on an ice rink. That's minimum friction. There's still friction there, but if you can imagine the hockey puck just sliding on the ice rink from one end of the rink to the other, it's not going to stop or slow down. It'll slow down a little bit because of the friction on the ice. But if there were zero friction, that hockey puck would just keep going and going and going until it hits the wall. So in that case, the wall slowed it down. If you've got something like a hockey puck floating out in outer space and it has a velocity on it, there isn't anything out in outer space to get in its way or slow it down. So that hockey puck is just going to continue on forever until something applies a force and then converts its velocity from 30 meters per second back down to zero. So very important to understand that it takes energy to speed things up from a dead stop and get them moving faster, but equally important to understand that it actually takes some sort of energy to get that thing to come to a stop or slow down, because it's not going to do that on its own. Even if there's something like friction, that is some sort of force that's going to slow that down, right? There's Galileo, there's Orson Welles. I always thought that Orson could play the Galileo story, but anyway. So this is Galileo's principle of relativity. And again, we're dealing with boats because it was long before we had automobiles. And what he said was, shut yourself up with some friends in the main cabin below decks on some large ship. And this is with the ship not moving at all, by the way. Have with you some flies, butterflies, other small flying animals. Hang up a bottle that empties drop by drop into a vessel directly beneath it. With the ship standing still, observe carefully how the little animals fly with equal speed to all sides of the cabin. The drops fall into the vessel beneath, and in throwing something to your friend, you need throw it no more strongly in one direction than another, the distances being equal. Kind of like what's going on in this room right now. So we could say that the boat is docked, it's not moving anywhere. This room is docked to the ground, it's not moving anywhere. I could do all kinds of experiments and they would all indicate that we're not moving. I'll throw a ball straight up, it'll come straight down. I could bounce a ball, I could throw something this way, I could throw something that way, and I'll get the same effect. What Galileo observed was, have the ship proceed with any speed you like so long as the motion is uniform. And again, what he's talking about is that constant velocity, that uniform inertial motion. We're not accelerating. We're traveling at a very constant, smooth velocity and not fluctuating this way and that. So the boat isn't rocking. It's not jerking, speeding up, slowing down. It's just a nice, smooth, whatever speed you like. You will discover not the least change in all the effects named, nor could you tell from any of them whether the ship was moving or standing still. In other words, all of the effects, all of the experiments that you can perform on this boat when it's completely docked will be duplicated. The results will be duplicated if that boat is in motion but is at constant velocity. And so if you are in the main cabin below the decks and you have no view to the outside world, no porthole, no window, you're not up above the deck, there's no experiment, according to Galileo, that you could do that would determine whether you're actually in motion or not. And that kind of makes sense. Everybody's had experiences where they've either ridden in a car or on a train or even on a boat where if they get caught up in doing something like reading a magazine or whatever, they might not know whether they're actually in motion or not. Another example is if you're on a train or on a subway and you're right next to a track with a train going in the opposite direction next to you. Sometimes one of the trains speeds up and you might not know immediately which one it is because you don't feel that acceleration if you're going constant velocity. So you might need some other reference to determine whether you're moving or not. So that's really the heart and soul of Galileo's principle of relativity, is that all motion is relative. There is no absolute motion because each moving boat, moving ship, moving whatever, as long as it's going at constant velocity and it's not accelerating, is its own inertial frame of reference, which will enjoy all of the same experimental results that we would have here on Earth without moving a bit. Okay? So it's a free-floating inertial frame, and we're going to get the same result here as we do here, as long as it's constant velocity. Once the sailing ship reaches constant velocity, it becomes its own floating inertial reference frame, Galileo realized that with no view to the outside world, there is no experiment that you can conduct to determine whether you're moving or not. In other words, the laws of physics on the moving ship are the same as they are on the stationary one. Okay? Very, very important. So, and this is going to